Hey, good morning, everybody. I know many of you, so it looks like a tough crowd to me. Um, I joined Louisville Metro at the end of 2007. In 2008, we had a third bicyclist killed. Mayor Abramson at that time pulled us all together. We had a multidiscipline team look at these bicycles. But at that same meeting, I pulled out a map and we set a record for pedestrian fatalities that year. Our pedestrian fatalities here in Jefferson County account for approximately 1/4 of all of our roadway fatalities. In 2020, we set another record. I think that COVID has, kept some people home. We had fewer cars on the street, but obviously those cars are traveling faster. Of those pedestrian fatalities in 2020, all of them were non-daylight conditions. Now, at night, you have about 25% of your daily traffic, and 3/4 of it's in the daytime, and have that people, pedestrians dying at night with fewer cars on the road. You can see why it's such a focus for our efforts. When I first started digging into the safety and was introduced to FHWA's proven safety countermeasures, I think when I originally started looking at these, there were a total of 9 countermeasures that were being recommended. Recently, they added several more, and today, just for pedestrian and bicyclists, we have 8 proven safety countermeasures. Okay, this is the site. We have several new ones here on speed management. Fatality numbers are up, 2020, 2021. All areas were showing a decrease in fatalities and serious injuries in Kentucky, with the exception of pedestrians. It has continued to climb, but in 2020 and 2021, fatalities are up, speeds are up. You drive our roadways, speeding is rampant. Everybody here drives the speed limit, right? Not so much. Okay, so the enforcement's slow in Kentucky. LMPD has been a little bit diverted to other issues in our community, so that enforcement is not on the street as much as needed. Highway patrol seems to be understaffed. You're not seeing a lot of people getting tickets written here when we cross the river over in Indiana. Then we have to slow down again because their highway patrol was working that section I-64 when we first crossed the river. So 3 of the brand new ones here are just speed management. We've got 3 different pieces of legislation related to cameras. One of them is red light running cameras, and this is state representatives or Senate. Red light running cameras, cameras on bus arms, school bus arms, and then there's still one out there that was camera speed enforcement in work zones. As far as I know, I don't know if any of them progressed out of committee. We've got new roadway departure categories here. There's a brand new one. It's the wider edge lines. I think you'll notice that KYTC now on many of the arterials are using a 6-inch edge line, and that's in thermo. And we've got a whole lot of engineers here that would understand what I'm talking about when I say 6-inch edge lines in thermo. Do we have some folks here that aren't engineers or related to the engineering community? Okay, I see you, Chuck. Stop me if I talk like an engineer. So if you need some clarification, just let me know. We have all these improvements for intersections. Then you get into the pedestrian and bicyclist. We've got 3 new ones here: crosswalk visibility enhancements, bicycle lanes, and rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So I'm pleased to see RFBs added to this list. It's been quite effective, and we're doing a few here. And then there's some of the things that have been here for some time. There's another program out there by the FHWA. It's Everyday Counts EDC, Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian Step program. The STEP program is being encouraged. So NHTSA came out in 2016. They had the most pedestrian fatalities since 1990. I know Louisville, we're seeing spikes, but I think we're seeing this nationally. Also in 2016, 72% of pedestrian fatalities occurred away from the intersections. So I can tell you here in Louisville, our crashes for pedestrians aren't occurring in the intersection. It is away from it. And we've got a roadway system that was built to move cars. We've got a lot of offset intersections. We don't have enough sidewalks connecting along our roadways. There aren't many people that are going to walk 300 feet. Well, I can tell you, I don't walk 120 feet to get to the light to cross 5th Street out here in front of my building. So pedestrians aren't going to go move to that controlled crossing unless it's very, very convenient. So walkways, sidewalks. Here in Jefferson County, we've got the MPOs, KIPTA, Kentucky and Indiana Planning and Design Agency. So we recently updated the Metropolitan Transportation Plan of the vision for the next 20 years. And the 2 categories that received the most responses from the community were fix the sidewalks that we have or add sidewalks to fill in the gaps. I know, I don't know what it's like in your communities, but we got the new Parklands of Floyd's Fork, a wonderful park, and I've got South English Station, and they're a short distance away from one of the entrances to the park, and then we don't have a sidewalk. We've got so many gaps in our sidewalks here in our community. But if you can't, if you're more rural areas, sidewalks may not be the answer. If you add a paved shoulder, you can get a 70%, 71% reduction in pedestrian crashes. Now, the safest width of a paved shoulder is between 4 to 6 feet for both bikes and pedestrians from the research I've done. And I kind of question what happens when you get even wider? What happens when you go past 6 feet? A car is about 6 feet wide, so you get to 7 feet, and then the driver uses the shoulder as an additional lane. So you get this lane switch that can result in more crashes. So you don't, all you folks out there that are designing bicycle facilities, I get a little nervous when we get wider than 6 feet because it becomes very attractive to motorists to use it. We did a layout on Breckenridge in Kentucky. It's a one-way street. We took one of the lanes away and made it a bicycle facility. We had a 2-foot buffer from the parked cars. We had a 4-foot bike lane, and then we had another 2-foot buffer from the through traffic, and that totaled 8 feet. And what we found was that 8 feet was real attractive to get those wheels running on those buffers, and they were using it just like an additional lane, and it gave them a good line to work with. We had to come back in later and add posts to prevent those motorists from using it as an additional lane. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons. I don't know, do you all have these in your community? It's relatively new. There's there was even a challenge for the pattern of the light sequencing. We have several in the community. One right next, very close to our building here. An RRFB, it makes a tremendous difference in the yield rate. The beacons that flash 24/7 at a pedestrian crossing, we've all seen them, the diamond with the yellow lights flashing all day long, all night long. And there's no pedestrians present. Motorists drive through those, they decide, hey, I don't see anything, so then they tend to ignore them. The RRFB is typically either has automated detection or a push button. Here in Jefferson County, our traffic department prefers the push button. So it only comes on when a pedestrian is present. Well, that makes the yield rate really jump up for the users that push that button. And it has a 47% reduction in crashes. The RRFB is something that you want to put at a mid-block intersection. You don't want to, my council members at the time asked me to add an RRFB to a signalized intersection. You cannot do that, but it is an uncontrolled crossing except for the pedestrians. As far as I can tell, and others on here may know better than I, there's thresholds for how many pedestrians in a peak hour you have before you can install a pedestrian hybrid beacon, for example, which I'll discuss later. But the RRFB can be used without that threshold. My hope is that, pedestrians won't go very far to get to a controlled crossing, but the addition of an RRFB, as well as the high visibility crosswalk, will encourage them to get to that location and make a crossing. Now my headache is I don't have a sidewalk that connects you to it, so then we've got to build a lot of sidewalks too. And we don't have enough money for all of it.
Dirk, we have a question from Jeff Dick. What is the max speed you would recommend using existing shoulder as walking path? 35 miles per hour or below? ?
Oh, no, I think you can put that on a rural 50-mile-an-hour roadway. You can do that anywhere. And plus, the shoulder not only gives you the benefit of a safe spot for the pedestrians and the bicyclist, but it also makes the road safer for the drivers as well, because now you have some shy distance away. We talk a lot about lane widths and safety, and we tend to use highway design standards for urban streets and how wide a street lane width is in our urban streets. But from the research I've done, it looks to me like it's really the total width of asphalt. I feel, and this is anecdotal, that if I put a 10-foot lane down and I have a 4-foot shoulder, I have 14 feet of pavement, and that is as safe as a 12-foot lane with a 2-foot shoulder. It's just marked differently, but it slows down the traffic a little bit. And slowing traffic, calming traffic is a big part of what I'm trying to do.
A follow-up to that is there a recommended 5-foot buffer between space for sidewalks?
There's an AASHTO guide and a brand new one for pedestrians. And it recommends a 3-foot to 5-foot buffer to a 5-foot sidewalk traditionally. You can build it at the back of the curb. Then they recommend you go to a 6-foot wide sidewalk, except in commercial areas, if you do it at back of curb, they want an 8-foot wide sidewalk. So you end up with really the same as a 3-foot buffer and a 5-foot sidewalk. They want an 8-foot wide sidewalk at that back of curb. Does that answer the question?
I don't have a follow-up just yet. I was trying to find the AASHTO guide on that one too.
This is Jeff Dick. My question is really is, if it has a 5 to 8 foot buffer space recommended, how can we use a shoulder for a multi-use pass within those 6-inch spacing with the striping all spacing the traffic, especially on 50 mile per hour roadway? So that's just my concern. We've had others, LPAs wanting to use a shoulder for a walkway, and I've discouraged it because, you've got a walkway with just a stripe separating you and the outside of a curve of a 55 mile per hour roadway. One glance at a phone, you've hit a pedestrian. So that's my concern. But you feel more sidewalks than I have, and I haven't. I'm just in a rural district here, so.
Okay, yeah. So you're really talking about a shoulder, and I'm not suggesting that it's a shared use path. The shoulder is a bicycle is eligible to use the shoulder. They consider a bicycle a vehicle, which I ride my bicycle like a vehicle, but it really isn't. It's not the same. It's just not. But the cyclist should ride that shoulder in the direction of traffic. And there's an overwhelming number of we have a lot of cyclists that die from being rear-ended. And so if you can give them the space to operate outside of that travel lane, they've got a better chance out there. Now, pedestrian, by state law, with the shoulder, in my interpretation, they should be walking against traffic. So they should be on the other side of the road. And they should be walking toward the cars. So that you should ride the bike on the right side, you should walk on the left side. Does that make sense? So the pedestrian should be looking at somebody that's coming toward them and has the opportunity, hopefully, to jump out of the way.
Yeah, I understand that. I just have concern of, putting a lady in a stroller walking 5 foot from a 55 mile per hour traffic with a 6-inch stripe separating them. So, if it had a curb, and of course it wouldn't be 55, it's curb and gutter, but
yeah,
if it's 45 curb and gutter, it's still be some concern, but I feel better with that separation with a raised curb. So that's just my personal opinion and my concern. So.
No, I can't. A sidewalk is better than just the shoulder. But it's not. It's 65 to 89% safety benefit, but the paved shoulder is 71. So it's better than them walking in the road, Jeff.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah, we've got a 6-lane here in Somerset, and I see people walking down the gutter line all the time on 6-lane highway, 20,000 cars a day. So yeah, I definitely agree it's better. But if we have area to put a sidewalk, if the LPA asks for a sidewalk, I'm going to refer them to either try to get it behind the guardrail or put it somewhere else farther away from traffic at all possible, which would be more expensive for them than it would just to be restripe a shoulder. No, it's just my concern, and in a rural community here in a tourist area where people do walk quite often. And, but no, a shoulder is better than walking in the gutter line.
So the more current guidance on a shared use path, for example, the higher the speed, the further the separation they want to see. So you're right. The higher the speed, it is better if it's separated. But that 5-foot shoulder is better than nothing at all.
I agree. Thank you very much.
So then there's, and then a lot of this is urban. So there's the leading pedestrian interval. Anybody who's visited Louisville has seen these. It is, here we give a 4-second head start. So it's all red for the cars and vehicles, and then the pedestrian gets the walk line sign a bit early so they can enter. Now, interestingly, I've got a complaint from the blind community is a bit frustrated by that because we don't have audible everywhere, but I think if you look at the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines that I'm hearing it might be approved this year. All signals have to be vibrotactile and audible, in my interpretation. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. But when we get that walk sign coming on early, the blind is looking for the sound of the cars that are moving. So if we got all red for the cars, there's no movement. So they stay on that curb until those cars start to move. So they're not able to capture that advantage.
The Florida Department of Transportation uses the LPI, or leading pedestrian interval, to provide an additional level of safety for people walking. The LPI provides an offset or head start for pedestrians when crossing the street. This allows pedestrians to cross in advance of vehicles making turning movements. LPI is low cost, easy to implement, and requires no additional equipment. But how does the LPI work? Once the walk indication begins, the pedestrians may start walking, but vehicles are required to wait between 3 and 7 seconds before they get a green light. This places the pedestrian in the field of view of waiting motorists and reduces the likelihood of conflicts. The interval is typically 3 to 7 seconds, as determined by the responsible agency.
Okay, crosswalk visibility enhancements. Now, I think our profession is struggling with we have studies that say, you know, adding a crosswalk doesn't make that mid-block crossing any safer. But now we've got more guidance that's coming, has started to come out that says there's ways to make this a lot safer. And it's not just the high visibility crosswalk. So we're starting to put these in, KYTC and working with us here in District 5. This is what I would consider more of a gateway treatment. If you can see that, it's got the in-road sign. We're a yield state, so that it says here, yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. Adding the high visibility crosswalk. When I say high visibility, it's what this ladder crosswalk that you see here. It's traditionally Kentucky, KYTC uses thermal through that intersection, and then it's got stripes that run along the edges, so it looks like a ladder on the roadway. That ladder crossing, the high visibility in that mid-block location is so much better than just a single set of stripes there. For the motorists can see it and come forward. So the intersection lighting. I told you in 2020, we had roadway fatalities, pedestrian fatalities, all of them were at non-daylight. So we're doing studies right now to look at our street lighting and how we can improve that. We struggle with Louisville Metro spends, I think, over $5 million for streetlights with a lease with LG&E annually. They put the poles in and then they just charge us for the installation and the electricity, so a lease rate. So we were hesitant to keep the price of that electricity to go up on us. So we've kind of slowed down adding street lights. And here I'm advocating we add street lights. And not only that, I don't know how well you can see this picture. You see the street light is in advance of the crosswalk. Ideally, it should be 10 feet in advance of the crosswalk on both sides. And so even the placement of the street lights needs some consideration. This is an area where we have a lot of room to grow and improve on making our roadways safer. Then there's advanced yield or stop markings and signs can reduce pedestrian crashes an additional 25%. I think you'll see a lot of, my experience is with D5, but I'm guessing that all the districts are now adding advanced yield bars to these high vis crossings in our community. There's a brand new guide for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations, relatively new. This was released in 2018, so it's been updated in 18. This is coming from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. One of the authors is Charlie Zagier, and to my understanding, Charlie started his career at the Kentucky Transportation Center. Now lives in North Carolina. So there's a table 1. So it's got recommendations based upon speed limits, daily traffic, and roadway configurations. And then it looks at 9 improvements: high visibility crosswalks, a raised crosswalk, advanced yield here to or stop here for pedestrian sign. In our case, advanced yield bars, an in-street pedestrian crossing sign, curb extensions, a pedestrian refuge island, the RRFB that we discussed, a road diet, and then pedestrian hybrid beacon. Now they put those, if the number appears just itself, that signifies that it's a candidate for that treatment. When it's circled with when that number is circled with the black ring on it, that signifies that the countermeasures should always be considered. Now, this is not mandated, it's not required, but it should always be considered, which is a strong identification that you should look hard at that improvement. And then when they put just an open circle around it or add the circle to it, that crosswalk visibility enhancements should always occur in conjunction with the other identified countermeasures. This was a great resource, and it's we're applying it on numerous locations in our community. Medians and refuge and pedestrian refuge islands. I don't know that we've got enough of these. We end up with a lot of 5-lane, 3-lane, 5-lane roadway sections. Dixie Highway, for example, Dixie Highway had 7 lanes, that center turn lane, and we had lots and lots of crashes in that kind of condition. We added a median, and it's made a significant difference in the number of crashes. Although I had one went across my desk that somebody actually flew over that median and ended up hitting cars in the opposite direction. So it was not a pretty crash. Can't stop all the crashes, but the median helps a lot. The center turn lane is somewhat of a refuge, but it does better if it has concrete and it's a barrier median.
In general, a safe place for pedestrians to cross the road is at a well-marked, controlled location, often at an intersection. But in 2016, 72% of pedestrian fatalities occurred at mid-block locations, between intersections. So, how do we reduce fatalities at these locations and provide safe transportation for every pedestrian? Pedestrian refuge islands can be an effective option, reducing pedestrian crashes by up to 32%.
Pedestrian refuge islands are great. They are basically a raised area in the middle of the street where vehicles physically can't go. And they are intended to sort of break up the crossing.
The key is that it lets pedestrians cross the road in 2 sections.
By adding that pedestrian refuge island, it gives them a safety zone so that they don't have to cross 6 lanes of travel at one time. They can cross 3, pause, wait till the traffic heading in the opposing direction is clear, and then cross through. It just gives them a safety buffer.
Refuge islands are ideal for crossings that traverse at least 4 lanes of traffic with speed limits of 35 miles per hour or greater. The refuge island should be at least 4 feet wide, preferably 8 feet, and marked with a high visibility crosswalk, lights, and signage. In-street stop or yield to pedestrian signs can also be placed in the median to remind road users of pedestrian right-of-way at an unsignalized pedestrian crosswalk. A pedestrian crossing warning sign may be used in combination with an in-street sign, and the warning sign must be post-mounted on the right-hand side of the roadway at the crosswalk location.
They're very flexible, they're inexpensive, and they're easy to put in if the space is available.
Contact FHWA for more information on using refuge islands and other measures to provide safe transportation for every pedestrian.
Next, we've got pedestrian hybrid beacons. Now, we've got one here in Louisville that I think we were the first to put one in. I'm not sure if others have been added in the state. A pedestrian hybrid beacon
when motorists approach a dark beacon, they may continue through the crosswalk without slowing down or stopping. A flashing yellow light means that a pedestrian is waiting to cross, and motorists should proceed with caution. The flashing yellow lights will be followed by solid yellow lights, which indicate that motorists should stop if safe to do so. The solid yellow light will be followed by solid red lights. As usual, when seeing a red light, motorists need to stop. The solid red light will be followed by alternating flashing red lights, which indicates that after first stopping, motorists can proceed with caution through the intersection as long as there are no pedestrians in the crosswalk.
Now, a pedestrian hybrid beacon is in the manual and uniform traffic control devices and does have a series of warrants for when to install. So the pedestrian volumes, the minimum peak hour you have to have for it, the guideline is for 20 pedestrians in that peak hour. But as the peak hour, the approaching vehicles, total of both approaches goes lower, then they want to add more. They want to add more pedestrians to warrant the use of the pedestrian hybrid beacon for the delay, and then it's also based upon the distance of the crossing. So that's in Figure 4F-1 in the manual and uniform traffic control devices. So it's sometimes it's hard to get the warrants needed to put one in, and actually the one that we put in that was it was serving a restaurant on the waterfront and other activities in the opposite of parking lot on River Road, and it's not open at the present. It's supposed to open up again, but we no longer meet the warrants for the one that we do have. Here's one of our favorite treatments of 2022 is road diets. We call it street right sizing because nobody really wants to diet, it seems. We've got a lot of 4-lane roadways with 2 lanes each direction in Jefferson County, and up to as many as 20,000 cars a day on that kind of cross section can be converted from that 4 lanes to 3 lanes. It gives a center 2-way left turn lane, and then you've got additional room that can be either a shoulder or it can be a bike lane. A lot of crashes occur with that 4-lane roadway, side swipes, rear ending. You get somebody in that center lane that wants to make the left turn from there, and so it essentially chokes it down to becoming a single lane each direction. So when you make this conversion, you don't really lose capacity, particularly if you have a lot of left turns, but you do slow down speeds, and you do have a significant reduction of crashes. They say as many as 19 to 47%. We're past, we exceeded 47% KYTC did a road diet on Grinstead Drive next to our Cave Hill Cemetery. There was a lot of crashes through there. The speeds, it's got some curves in it, so there was some slick pavement. But they went to the 3-lane section, and they had last I checked was like a 69% reduction in crashes of that section.
Hey, Dirk, you have a question. Due to the pedestrian hybrid beacons being rare in Kentucky, do you see issues with drivers not knowing how to approach them?
Yeah. You know, when our experience is when you get the solid red, they would stop. But when it's flashing red and they can go ahead and go through once it's clear, it should be like any flashing red light. You stop and go. A lot of times they'd sit there and wouldn't move for the flashing red. And that's, you know, they're not moving, so nobody's getting hurt. So it's okay. I hadn't really thought about it. You know, one of the first road diets we did, I had some woman call me up and said I needed to educate people on how to use the center turn lane. So we probably ought to consider, you know, getting a driver's license and renewing a driver's license should be a little harder, in my opinion. Should be a little bit more making sure that you know what you're doing when you're on the roadway. Going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, you're reducing rear end left turn crashes. You're reduced right angle crashes. Fewer lanes for pedestrians to cross. An opportunity to install pedestrian refuge islands, bicycle lanes, on-street parking or transit stops, traffic calming, and more consistent speeds. When one person drives the speed limit, I know KYTC just did one on Lexington Road, it's in front of Catholic school. And it was often the case that I would drive through there and see people traveling 50 miles an hour in a 35 mile an hour zone in front of the school. And then when it was reduced to 25 miles per hour, it was typically still 35 to 40 miles per hour. And so after the changes in that single lane, all of a sudden we're starting to see compliance to speed limits is closer, you know, within 5 miles an hour of what the actual posted speed limit is. So I'm really pleased with that. Of course, there's a lot of folks that travel through that want to just go fast as damn it and don't really want to slow down. But I'm always happy to see that the speeds are dropping. I'll say that our council, we've got 26 council districts, but I would wager that every one of those, the number one complaint they get in their districts is that speeding. There's too many people driving too fast on residential roadways. This is a picture of road diet on Southern Parkway. It's such a, you know, Google did a nice job on this. Look at this. You know, this is spring, early summer, so it looks really good. I like this picture. But we added bicycle lanes through here, and there's actually a bridle path along this side, so the bikes and pedestrians can use that side of the roadway and not get out here if they want to. Interestingly, I get complaints, and I understand this. With a 4-lane roadway, groups of cyclists would take the curb lane, and the cars could get around them on the inside lane. And now with this, they're confined to that 5-foot wide strip, so they can't ride in a group without getting out into that lane of the single travel lane. But the motorists can pass in the center turn lane to get around them. So I think it's working fairly well.
Hey, Dirk, do you have another question? Concerning road safety diets, roadway configurations, is speed a consideration when evaluating potential candidates that may benefit from the reconfiguration, or are these effective at all posted speed limits?
I think they're all effective at any speed limit, but you've got to look at what we do is, you know, up to 16,000 cars a day. a 4-lane roadway can go down to the 3-lane section, and it's still going to have the capacity. But, you go beyond 16 though, and then we go ahead and start to model the scenario using some traffic counts, intersection movements, looking at left turns, and we do speed studies before and after. So we try to assure that we're looking at one spot that's even over 20,000 cars a day to try to convert to 3 lanes because of the way it operates. So it's mostly the volume of traffic, not so much the speeds. I would think the faster you're going, the more you'd want that separation between the 2 travel lanes. We had a 4-lane roadway, Eastern Parkway, and some of the folks here from Gresham Smith did a study of it, and it's recommended to go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And we had somebody both traveling in opposite directions on that inside lane, and there's somebody who's dead now. And I'm have to think that if we had made that conversion already, that person might be alive. All right, I know I haven't talked a lot about the bicycle lanes, but bicycle lanes. Most fatal and serious injury crashes for bicyclists occur at non-intersection locations. And 1/3 of those crashes involve the overtaking motorist. The speed and size differential can lead to severe injury. Drivers look for their threats coming from their left, so their focus is out here. So if you're riding over here on the right side of that roadway, they may not see you. That's why it is the state law that you walk against traffic if you don't have a sidewalk, because that way you can see the car. Now the bicyclist is going the same direction and is required to go the same direction, so they can't see this vehicle overtaking them as well. And that's why I try to go ahead and get in a position out in a lane and go ahead and come out so that I make sure that I'm in that driver's eye, and I frustrate drivers. But if it's not wide enough for them to safely pass within the lane that I'm in, I want to get out there and make sure they see me. But a lot of cyclists don't do that. They stay over on that right side. So getting rear-ended can be devastating. So adding a bicycle facility, giving some kind of spot out there where they can get out of it. And, there's nothing we can do that's going to prevent everybody from, I wish we could get people to set those phones down and pay attention and stay in their lanes. Everything we do is not going to prevent this. It's not going to prevent all crashes, but providing that additional room is going to make a difference. Now, FHWA is now looking at separated bicycle lanes. They've got a study that's going on, research that they claim is going to be available to us this fall. And there is a bikeway selection guide, and this is a Federal Highway Administration. It's a guide from 2019. You've got several levels of bicyclists. You've got a whole group here that wants to be down here that doesn't want to really play with cars. You've got some that will get out in some facilities, maybe on a bike lane, maybe on a paved shoulder. And then there's the high stress tolerance that this guy over here on the far right, he's going to get out and ride in the roadway. And that's how I typically ride. So, but there's this FHWA guide on facility types. There's shared lanes. If it's less than 14 feet wide, you can use a shared lane marking, a SHARO often called. And that spacing is every 250 feet, I think. And we place them right in the middle of the road so the cars don't drive over them. We're trying to encourage those cyclists to get out toward the middle of the lane. But that needs to be a lower speed. What we're looking for is less than 3,000 cars a day, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, preferably. You have bicycle boulevards. We have shoulders, bike lanes. There are one-way separated bike lanes with mixing zones, which are an interesting concept. I'm not sure I'm thrilled by. And then you have separated bike lanes and side paths with protected intersections. Now, a side path is a shared use path that runs along a roadway. Now, AASHTO has a bike guide that you can look at, and I don't know how many, 17 different things you've got to be careful with a side path. A shared use path adjacent to a roadway is best if it's up against a railroad or an interstate or a creek, such that there's only few crossings of cars that cross that creek or across that railroad where you can actually control what's happening on that side path. The danger is that somebody on that side path, if it's over here on my right, if they're riding in the opposite the direction of the travel, if there's a left turning motorist going in from that main stem onto the side road, and there's somebody that's traveling on that side path in the same direction, that motorist may not see that bike coming up in that direction. They're looking toward the front of them. They're looking to their left. They're looking for forward and left for their threats, and getting T-boned when they make that left turn. So they're not really paying that much attention to what's happening on that side path. We did a pedestrian fatality evaluation. We found that left turning motorist is more likely going to hit a pedestrian than a right turning motorist by 2.5 times. So that left turn, they're looking for the gaps in the cars. They're not particularly paying much attention to what's happening on that side path. And additionally, that side path, as the speeds go up, needs to be further away from the roadway. I think there's a lot of folks out there that think a side path, a shared use path, is always going to be safer than that bike lane. But it really isn't in certain circumstances. So we need to understand what the concerns are and how to address those safety concerns with that shared use path. A facility that goes in the direction of travel of the cars is always going to be safer. I think you can do a contraflow lane on a one-way street on the left side where the motorists expect their conflicts. But otherwise, we need to, if it's 2-lane roadway, we probably are better off to have 2 separate facilities going in the direction of travel. And that's the safest system that you can provide. And a shared use path a side path is also made a lot safer if you have a median in the roadway, so that you're controlling where those left turns occur at an intersection. So possibly a controlled intersection. So there are ways to make that safer, but I just want to caution folks to just don't jump to a side path being a shared use path being the safest facility that you can put out. I've got more here, but I'm down to the last 2 minutes. I encourage every community to get a complete streets ordinance in place. I think KYTC, the state, is looking at a statewide complete streets ordinance, which I applaud. We have here a Vision Zero effort within Louisville. Now, the Office of Highway Safety, they funded a safety study. We have this whole safety plan for the state, but statewide is so rural. And then comparing that to what we have occurring here in Jefferson County, we'd asked for the Office of Highway Safety to prepare a safety study just for Jefferson County, which they did. And it is a wonderful effort. And I really applaud Mike Vaughn and his consultant team that prepared this report for us. We've got great information. And I think it opened some eyes at how some of the concerns in the rural parts of the state are not the same as here in the urban center. So with that, I'll kind of open up with some questions. And